I started recognizing patterns in my relationship and the correlation between those relationships and sex and pleasure and realizing like, wait a minute, you mean it's supposed to feel good? You mean I could do this myself? Like, what is this? So when I started exploring, I was so scared because it required me to be vulnerable, to like put my hands on my body and feel around and notice like what feels good. And then eventually I was able to open up and explore whether I use different toys, lubes, vibrators. And then I realized that when I would experience pleasure from that, and then there was a difference with my partner, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what else is here.
Healing was the warm-up. This is the main fucking event. Welcome to Go Regulate Yourself, the unapologetic, unfiltered love letter you didn't know you needed. This is where mental health meets real life, where growth gets gritty, and where we stop pretending healing makes us saints. Think of it like therapy with tequila shots and a side of tough love. In this space, we're learning how to take responsibility for our shit, face the chaos of life, and become the best version of who we are. So if you're ready for your weekly "what the fuck am I doing" moment, let's dive in. Hi, Reg Babes. We're back for another Fridays with Friends episode here on the Go Regulate Yourself podcast, and I am so excited to introduce you to our next guest. Now, today's conversation is a taboo one of sorts, and we are talking all about turning self-pleasure into self-love. That's right, we're talking about orgasms, exploring yourself, and learning how to truly love yourself, trust yourself, and demand more for your life. Now, our guest today is Victoria Icenhower, and she is a self-love scientist and women's empowerment coach who supports individuals in cultivating deeper intimacy with themselves through embodiment, confidence, and intentional pleasure practices. She brings a grounded, compassionate approach to conversations around self-pleasure, emotional wellness, and reclaiming one's relationship with the body. Today's conversation was so good, and we touched on so many important pieces, and this is a conversation I swear every single woman needs to hear. So without further ado, let's dive on in. Hello, Reg Babes, and welcome back to another Fridays with Friends episode on the Go Regulate Yourself podcast. My name is Brianne. I am your host, and we are about to dive into probably one of our most taboo conversations on the podcast today, which I am so ready and excited for. So today I am joined by Victoria. Victoria, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited because I feel like this is going to be extra special and maybe a spicy episode.
It for sure is going to be spicy, and I am here for all of those vibes. I feel like our audience is also looking for a little bit more in-depth conversation in regards to this particular area. So I'm very sure that we're going to get into some goodness today. Now, as far as our conversation goes, we are going to be talking about reclaiming part of ourselves in the area of self-pleasure. But before we dive into that specifically, would you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself? Let us know a little bit about you, where you're from, what you do, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Victoria Icenhower. I go by the self-love scientist, and I've been holding that for about, I would say, almost 4 years now. And I grew up in Virginia, and I've moved around and traveled around as a secret passion of mine. Um, for the past couple years, I have had my fair share of midlife crisis before the age of 30. And, you know, I can say that now and like joke and giggle about it, but in the moments that they were, whether it was divorce, death, dieting, getting back into dating, like all those things. And then there's the moving. I used to move so frequently. Like most people find a place and they're there 3 to 5 years. I would move somewhere, and every year, every 2 years, and my friends were like, "Well, where are you going next?" And so, um, with these, different crises though, like the one year was 2022 where it was my divorce, I lost family, um, living on my own for the first time, and having to learn how to create multiple streams of income to support myself, which AKA the dieting, and then finally feeling confident enough to put myself out there in the real world with dating. I finally realized the biggest supplement for my journey and moving forward into the woman I want to become and knowing the relationships that I was worth all came down to understanding how to love myself through self-love practices, which is more than just getting your hair done and nails. It's the deeper work, which looks like, what does like my sexuality even feel like to me? How can I create the space to welcome in more love from other people? And so from that pivotal point in 2022, I launched my coaching brand as a self-love scientist and started opening up the conversations around, how I can encourage and help more women tap back into their self-loving relationships so they can redefine the future ones. And a couple years later, I started the Love and Lattes podcast, which you will be on very soon. And those are all conversations, resources, experiences from not just myself, but therapists, coaches, other wonderful people around the world who are here to share, like, here, let me tell you something that is very important. And they're warm, unfiltered conversations that I think people can tune into and just feel like I used that. I definitely needed that today. And aside from all the coaching and the self-love journey and being an absolute wanderlust, I also enjoy working out. So I'm a Pilates instructor,
You got all the buckets.
right? I checking some of those boxes. So
Amazing. Well, I know that a lot of your journey up until this point, both your personal experiences and your professional experiences, have likely led you to our conversation and what we're going to discuss. And I just want to kind of dive right into the deep end. So, for myself, I know that the conversation of sex, intimacy, even love was something very restricted growing up. That was not a conversation that we had. That was not something you talked about. And I was very much through my life experiences kind of put in this area of my life where it felt like my body was not my own. And I know that led to a lot of really poor decisions and choices that I made throughout
mhm,
this entire lifetime. But I'm wondering when we think about the topics of sex, of masturbation, of self love, why would you say that these are so taboo and so restricted? And what has your personal journey kind of looked like in reclaiming that?
that's a very great question. A lot of it, actually, the censoring of even the words or the thoughts come from a source of shame. And like you said, like even in my childhood, I did not grow up in a household where sex or personal pleasure was even a conversation. Sex was more like, birds and
Mhm.
bees, but even that conversation, it wasn't even about consent or knowing your body, loving your body, which is a core principle behind that. But there's a lot of censorship in the media, in the textbooks, where interesting enough, it's something where a woman's sexuality, it's like it has to be censored because women are meant to fit in this box, this mold of stay quiet, stay soft, stay small. And we're starting to recognize now, even in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, we're starting to learn more because now we have the funds to discover, like, actually, a woman's body, especially in her, vulva area, is literally just built for pleasure. That's it.
Mhm.
But why
Mhm.
why are we knowing about this now? Because the focus on women has not become as big as it has for many, many years. And so when I say the shame part, it's whether you were growing up or even your parents or any of your guardians growing up, they were using what they knew, what they talked about. So it's not a common conversation. I have met very few people who grew up in a house where sexuality and pleasure was a open-ended conversation. And we're
Mhm.
starting to realize that, you know, let's say as an example, um, when we were younger as a child and you put your hand down your pants, your parents were like, "Oh, don't do that," and they tap your hand, and so as a child, maybe that wasn't a big deal, but mentally, subconsciously, your brain's like, no, don't do that.
Hmm.
So there's some kind of, we're creating a limiting belief around your body. Now we're creating a limitation as to exploration. And um, yeah, I would get very excited and be like, unfortunately, in this kind of society, there's just this desire to control what we can and cannot do. So the research and the circles and the conversations on how women can take hold of their sexuality and their confidence and their pleasure is becoming more and more. We're trying to find ways to have them like we are now, but even like on social media, we get blocked or deleted. And so we talked about like the shame part, but then the opposite of that is the confidence. When a woman is in tune to her sexuality and knows what feels good in her body, she is a confident woman, and that's what scares the world.
You are so right about that. But speaking to like the childhood part that you mentioned, I definitely remember like any association, putting your hand down the pants, it was connotations of like that's dirty, that's bad, right? There's a lot of these limiting beliefs that are getting instilled from a really early age. And when it happens once, maybe we don't really remember it, but when it happens a lot of the time and we're getting that same programming from the media, as you said, then it definitely can lead to these really big problems with intimacy later on in life. And I know I've spoke about my journey on the podcast quite a bit. I was sexually abused when I was younger. I had a very promiscuous and rebellion teenager years where I did a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have, and definitely was in a really poor place with my body by the time I got together with my husband. And I really struggled to connect in the bedroom for a long time because of the intimacy issues that I had with just allowing myself to feel pleasure and to feel okay and things not to feel dirty. And it took a long time for him to walk me through a lot of that. And I'm so lucky that my husband was supportive in that journey. But not everybody can find their way through that with a partner.
Yeah.
So, would you mind explaining to us kind of what your journey looked like through this process of going from somebody who maybe in childhood struggled a lot with those type of beliefs and or things that you learned from family, the media, etc., and how later on in life you were able to rewrite that story?
Sure. I'll see if I can kind of puzzle the timeline. And I appreciate you sharing that because I think it is not easy to go through this experience to even have that recognition without some form of help, whether it's through a partner or a very confident friend. This is something that is, and the reason why it is so difficult is because it's a very vulnerable place. Um, and I'll preface when I say this, like access to you sexually is a privilege. But again,
Mhm.
depending on that upbringing, depending on our experiences, is going to morph and shape how we allow that. And for women, we just want everybody to come in because we really think that there's some kind of external validation from that. So for me, it was when I was married, I was gonna say many years ago. Feels like it.
Feels like
Feels
that.
like it. It was when I was married. My own priority for myself didn't exist. I did not have the capacity to respect or love myself. I didn't realize that I was worthy or anything. My whole life was built on that. I was like checking the box. Like, got the job, secured the husband, and I secured the house, and I got the dogs, and I'm on my way to pop the baby. And then I started spending time, I was hitting burnout in work. So I started spending more time looking inward, and I discovered that I had so many limiting beliefs as to my potential. And I started recognizing patterns in my relationship and the correlation between those relationships and sex and pleasure, and realizing, like, wait a minute, you mean it's supposed to feel good? You mean I could do this myself? Like, what is this? And a lot of it, it did come from a source of, smaller traumas. And as a young child, like in schools, if I just show a little more skin, if I let them do as they like, then they'll love me and I'll be fine. because those are the messages we're getting. Like, don't say no, like just be grateful. And
Mm.
so I'm still married, but then I'm also exploring like my body. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am beautiful, but I don't take care of her enough. Like, how can I spend more time with her? And it became these small, small rituals. And this is coming from someone who is a workaholic. So whether it was taking a bubble bath or really slowing down when I put lotion on, and then one day I was in a container and I bought a book and I was reading about, how a woman's pleasure is connected to her confidence. And I kept thinking, I was like, this is so bizarre. Like I didn't like I love I love me an orgasm. I love it. But why can't I have this? Why don't I feel that sexual like desire and pleasure with my at the time husband? And I realized that it there was no real connection there for us. And I had blocks in my own space that I needed to work through. So when I started exploring, I was so scared because it required me to be vulnerable, to like put my hands on my body and feel around and notice like what feels good. And then eventually I was able to open up and explore whether I use different toys, lubes, vibrators. And then I realized that when I would experience pleasure from that, and then there was a difference with my partner, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what else is here. And for women and even the clients I have supported, I tell them, like, you have to start super gentle. It's not like the movies, don't go in hard and everything is so lubricated and you're gonna have an orgasm. Oh no, there's so much going on when this is happening. And so when I realized that when I became more confident and comfortable in self-pleasure and recognizing my, sexuality, I was like, oh, I can't just let anybody else in here. And then down the line, I went through a divorce, separated, moved, and along that journey was building up how can I become more confident again, whilst also, trying to support myself. And years after that, let's say 2024, I really felt like, I'm on top of the world, but the only reason why is because I chose to lead a life with pleasure. And when I have these conversations with people, whether it's friends or even in the dating scene, they're like you seem to have a really good head on your shoulders, like because I know what feels good. And I remember the conversations. There were people in the past. This is when I got comfortable with going back out there and dating. And I'll never forget, I had one gentleman ask me, I felt very safe with him. I was like, this is going to be so great. Flat out was like, so tell me what feels good. Like, what do you like? And I've never had anyone ask me that before. And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, oh my gosh, you mean I have a choice? Like, but then I wanted to feel confident in that. I think and now I do. And now in the bedroom, it's so sexy. Like, let me tell you what turns me on, or having that conversation with your partner where you're being, intimate or teasing or foreplay. You're like, oh no, do this more, faster, harder, softer, stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I know that was like a long-winded answer, but it definitely started super small by becoming vulnerable and recognizing that there was something, very common that I see when I have the conversation with clients or women in general. I'm like, well, what does pleasure mean to you? And most of the time it's like, what? And it's normal. It's so normal. Or I say, what does sex mean to you? And they're like babies? And I'm like, okay, yes, and tell me more. And it's no one's fault. It's nobody's fault. And my job and my passion is to help them remove the horse blinders on that, because when we do pull away what we were exposed to and the limiting beliefs, taking off the horse blinders also means, peeling back the layers to find out who you are and what feels really good, which is not easy, but it's absolutely worth it, because once you find what works for you, you do stand way stronger in who you are.
Mm. Hmm. I have so much that I want to touch on from what
Yes,
you
yes,
just
please.
said. I'm
I was
like,
like,
there are so many things as
yes.
you were talking. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to remember all these things that I want to say or ask. So first of all, going right back to where you said, like, loving an orgasm, which obviously we know is one of the biggest forms of pleasure that we can
Mhm.
possibly experience and a magnificent feeling. But then you were also touching on other things that can bring pleasure in relation to how our body feels. And whether that's putting on lotion or romanticizing our life in some other way, there are other ways to tap into a deep sense of pleasure too. And recently I heard the term heartgasm. I don't know if you've heard that before, but it's like the idea of doing things that bring you so much pleasure that you have like a heartgasm. So it feels like
Oh,
so good to you in your body. And I feel like we have to start to bring these things into our lives a little bit more. I know that the magic that I've experienced in my life in the last year is solely due to the fact that I've slowed down, I've romanticized my life, and I have made a point of creating stillness and space for me to be with myself. And I don't think that I would have found this deep sense of self love. Like, honestly, for the first 30, I'm 33 this year, just turned in October of last year. For the first 33 years or 32 years of my life, I don't think I actually knew what self love was. I think that I had this idea in my mind, but it was more so the self care. It was more so of like the doing of things, but not actually the
yeah.
connection to myself. And I think so many women are in this place where we don't actually know what that means, and to no fault of our own, but we have to start to learn to tap into that deeper connection to ourselves because it's, in my personal opinion, it's almost unexplainable to tell somebody what self-love actually is, because the moment that you get there and everything clicks and you do have that form for yourself, it's unexplainable in my own opinion, because it's a sensation that you can't really describe. It's kind of like an orgasm. You can't really describe what it feels like, but it's like, this full body tingling, this incredible sensation. And I think loving yourself very much is the same thing.
I agree. And I haven't heard of a heartgasm, but that sounds great. Sounds expansive. And you're right though, like that's the thing. People, I think early on when I became the self-love scientist, people were like, well, what does that mean? I was like, well, what does it mean to you? Because my form is not the same as yours. And even now, it gets kind of mixed in the realms of media where it's like, well, it's buying the candles and taking a bath. And it's like, well, let's go a little bit deeper. It's the sustainability and nourishment of the self-love relationship you have with yourself. And that could look like when you take the bath, are you breathing? Are you
Mm,
reading? Like, what are you doing? Because you made a good point. Like you can do all the care, but are you just adding it to fill a gap in something? Are you doing it to distract yourself? Or are you intentionally setting out with this purpose of, oh, Saturday nights are my self-love nights. I'm going to make a bath. I'm going to put roses in. I'm going to light my favorite candle and just be me. My phone's on do not disturb. Like that's sitting and being soft. That's
mm,
adding and pouring back into you versus, well, I gotta go get my nails done, then I gotta go get my hair done, then I get a spray tan. And if you're doing those things, I hope like you need to be doing it because it does make you happy, but it's not to meet someone else's needs. Like I want you to do those things
mm.
because you're like, that's what makes me whole. I love getting my nails done. I love, I'm getting a facial this afternoon. Yeah, right. Yeah. But those are the pieces that is part of who I am. But if I don't get them done, I'm not like, oh my God, like, ugh. It's like that's okay. If I don't make it out, I'll schedule some time to pleasure myself. Thank you.
Yeah, fill the gap with something else.
Right. And again, it's not that it's a gap, but it is important, you know, and I remind people all the time, I'm like, really, I do this almost if it's not happening every other day, it's definitely once a week where I look at my calendar and I'm looking at where, okay, I'm putting myself here. I have these interviews here. I'm teaching here. I call here. Where is where's my pause? Where's my blanks? Where are the blank spaces that I can fill with nourishment, with softness? And I'm very grateful to be at this point now where when I start my morning, I start very slow. It's soft. I brew coffee. I read a book and, I'm just cozy. And that is a way of like it's healing to my nervous system. And then I go on the day with as a badass battling the war. You know what I mean? Like, and then you wind down at night. So everybody's version is going to look a little different. The purpose of it is, are you spending the time, the intentions and the effort for that relationship, because the relationship you do have with yourself is going to be it's important. Like there's no other way else to say it, because if you're not pouring into yourself, this is where we see the burnout and the resentment in relationships.
Mhm. Yes. I also have to ask, and I hope that you're comfortable going into this and talking about it, but I want to know because obviously my journey to getting to the place that I am now, being so comfortable with sex and intimacy with my husband, I had him as a partner throughout that journey. And he, like the gentleman you spoke of, was very dedicated to my pleasure and to making sure that I feel safe and making a very trusting place within the bedroom itself. And that was a very beautiful thing for me to go through. And I needed that given my history with the trauma and everything that I had going on up until this point. But your journey looked a little bit different, and your pleasure was kind of found on your own. So, in your journey to kind of bringing self pleasure in, how did that transition look for you? Like we spoke about, where it's like almost like guilt and shame of like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm finding pleasure, but maybe I'm not with my partner or not in the same way, or there's a difference here. How did you kind of overcome that mental aspect and try to apply that to your relationship? And even though maybe it didn't work, like what are some ways that women could maybe consider this for themselves? I'm curious from the woman from like your standpoint who maybe wants to start incorporating in some self-pleasure
Mhm.
and utilizing toys and lube and that sort of thing. If she wants to start playing in that way curiously for herself and is worried about the impact on her relationship, like
Mm.
how did you navigate that component and how could she maybe consider some of those things within her journey to this process?
Oh, absolutely. So for the woman who wants to get started, again, it is a, initiation process. You have to set aside the time, communicate that with your person, like, hey, I'm just going to spend a little bit of me time or love time. I've heard many ways to express it, because I know even just saying masturbation can be like, I'm going to go masturbate. Sounds kind of, I'm like, I'm going to go pleasure myself. That's what I
It's a
say.
boy term.
Right. I like saying I'm gonna go pleasure myself, or, when I tell you, can you cuss on your podcast? Let me just make sure.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
100%.
So like one of the jokes I used to say to my girlfriends was like, when I tell you to go fuck yourself, I mean that with love. Like, please. And so for the woman who, is starting that journey, um, it can be a little like not even I'm not gonna say like I don't want to say unhinging, but if you notice like there is a difference in between how you feel with yourself compared to how you feel with your partner or someone else that you're dating, it is important to kind of take note, like what is the difference? What did you make
Mm,
different when you were in your personal practice, and how can you apply that for instances like, let's say, and I love this because I'm a romantic myself, like deep down, and there's a lover in all of us. But let's say you kind of like you have music, or maybe you light a candle and you're wearing something nice, or if you're not wearing anything, are you warm? Like, is the temperature of the room okay? So your body, you have to create that safety. You have to take your nervous system into a point of, I am relaxed. I can let myself go in this moment. Because the reality is, when women do start this journey, I hear it enough, and I guarantee it, the first even like 3 times you'll be trying, whether you're using a toy or just even starting on the outside by touching and exploring, or using a mirror to see what's going on, you'll be in it and then you'll check out. You'll be in it and then you're like,
mm,
did I leave the oven on? And what if someone calls me? And it's okay. That's mind chatter. There's a way to work through that. Um, but when you do experience pleasure for yourself and you're like, okay, but when I'm with my partner, it's a little different. And that's where um, I've created this bridge where I call it the pleasure principles. And one of the principles is communication. It is the honest conversations of, and your partner or the person you're seeing, the right person, just like your husband held, that beautiful support for you. They will want to know, the people who love you and want them to be in your life, they want to know what feels good for you. And it can be so scary for women because, again, now we're in new territory. Now I know what feels good for me, and now I know if and when I actually want to have pleasure or have sex, because that's the other issue is like when you set aside the time and your intentions are there, it's different when your partner's like, "Hey, like I was thinking we could spend time together." And you're like, "I'm done for the day." But I don't want them to be upset because I don't want this form of rejection and I feel guilty.
Mm.
So there's a lot of mixed feelings, but the number one thing is you need to set the state like not the standard, but you do have to have the conversation with them like, hey, I was thinking it'd be kind of romantic if we lit a candle or send him a flirty text like, I made a sexy playlist. Like I was thinking we could listen to that while we're, enjoying each other, stuff like that. And it's you're implementing those little things that worked really well for you and they get to share that experience and it adds to them. They might like it too. Um, so it is important to communicate that. And if you're noticing like there is a shift, like whether like if you're feeling really good when you spend time with yourself and you're not feeling so good with your person or someone you're seeing, you need to just kind of take note of it. Is maybe maybe it was just an off day and that happens. Like sometimes sex does not result in an orgasm and that is okay. But if it's something else, if there's something deeper there, I would definitely encourage women who are listening to like just kind of sit with it. Were you really wanting to do this with them, or maybe you got in your head and just things are really hard right now, and that's okay too. But take note what's different, and then draw those points. And if it looks like having a conversation, have the conversation sooner not when you're driving, but maybe have a conversation after dinner before you watch a show together. It's just really important because nobody, as despite like, people have their own programs on what sex and relationships look like, your person is not a mind reader, but they do want to know, sex is such a vulnerable experience. They're gonna want to know. Everyone wants to have a good time, but your person is gonna want to know, like, but does she really like that position though? And never
Mm.
hold yourself back from asking for more. Like if it feels really good and you're getting close, tell them. Or if you need more lube, like my one of my favorite jokes I used to say was I carry a tiny bottle of lube in all my purses, like little travel ones. I'm like, you can never have too much ever because the woman, our bodies are just so chemically interesting and challenging and complex and beautiful. But sometimes when you're like, I want to have sex, but physically your body might be, just not at the regulation. So there's not enough lubrication. That does not mean that you're invaluable, does not mean you don't want to. And the opposite, your body might secrete things and you're like, but I'm not ready. It is just, again, there's so much there, but it is so vital to have those conversations. And it doesn't make you a bad person because your pleasure is your own. What feels good to you is your, own. I think it was, what's her name? She has a podcast, um, Emily, and she's like, do not yuck your yum, do not yuck other people's yums because it's what's going to work for them. And it's important for the people
Mm.
in your life to know that too.
Absolutely, it is. And I feel that this is an important conversation for us to be having, not just for women in the area of sex, but in relation to communication about any of their needs. Because
Yes.
I know I have been blessed again in my relationship. My husband truly has been an incredible rock to my healing journey. Our communication has always been open, and I tell him everything, he tells me everything. So we're in this very open place that no matter what it is, if it's uncomfortable, we talk about it. That's just how our relationship works. But not everybody is in that position within their relationship. A lot of us have had our voices moldered for most of our life, where we feel like we can't speak up about a lot of things. And it takes a lot of courage, a lot of healing, a lot of work to get to that point where we are unleashing that. We're speaking up about our needs, our boundaries, saying no, saying yes, saying all the things.
Mm.
And so I think when women start to look at this and recognize that almost all of us have went through something similar in our life that has led to us shrinking or hiding or maybe not being fully authentically ourselves, that it can help them find a little bit of that courage to start speaking up. And I mean, if you're going to choose any area of your life to start putting in some boundaries or start asking for your needs, I feel like the bedroom is the perfect place to start for that. It's going to give you one of the biggest benefits.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mm. There's just a statistic, and the number haunts me to this day because it's 56% of women experience unsatisfying sex. 56.
Mm, mm,
If it was like 23 unsatisfying, I would be like, okay, but 56. And
that's high.
when they broke it down, like what are the factors? And one of them was the guilt and shame we felt for communicating what it is we really needed in those moments. And therefore, because of certain situations, upbringings, experiences, we feel that we're not worthy enough to express what we need. And it's like, nope, this is false. We need to fix this. And yeah, so
Mhm.
I think it's so important to have this conversation, and it starts out like it could be super small, even if you're like, I'm not in the mood, or I would love that. And also I think I need just a little more time with foreplay, or I just think it's really sexy when you like touch my shoulders or kiss my neck. Like it does not hurt to ask for more. And there's nothing wrong with that. So ask for more.
Yes, always, always ask for more from your partner, from the universe, from
Yes.
every place. I wanted to say too that I love what you were talking about when you were saying starting slow and, really just dipping your toes in to start, because I think we get so wrapped up in how other people do things that we expect ourselves to have to check off that box in the same way. And life just doesn't work that way. There are 1,000 different ways to do anything, and it's about figuring out what works specifically for your body, what makes you feel the most comfortable and helps you move in that direction the easiest. And so when you were talking about like playing with toys and, incorporating some of these things in, I'm very comfortable walking into a sex store to look at stuff, especially with my husband, but a lot of people are not, right? And when we start to thinking about bringing toys in, somebody might have a lot of, I guess, uncomfortable feelings with doing something like that for the first time if they've never done it before, or maybe they've done it before but had bad experiences with it. So if somebody isn't comfortable waltzing right into a sex store, well, there's other options. I mean, you could order toys offline if you wanted to. You could reach out to your best girlfriend and say, hey, do you want to go check out a sex shop, and like start to bring those conversations in. But I'm wondering, do you have any other advice or ideas for anybody who might be interested in starting to do some of these things, but maybe isn't quite there to do it on their own yet?
Oh yeah. And I think you've already named some really good points. It can be so fun going with someone that you feel comfortable with. And it could be like your best friend, or maybe it could be your aunt. Like who knows? Like it needs to be someone, like if you're going with someone that you're like, this this is something important. I'd really like to do this. Or, um if you go by yourself, I like going in person, one because there's just so much. And talking to the
Yeah.
people who work at the stores are the coolest people I've ever met. I've shopped in stores around the country. My favorite ones were in Europe because sex is it's not censored
Mm.
there. It's not considered something shameful. They're like,
It's
it's
natural.
here. And like I had a gent like pulling stuff out, and he's like, this is like where you can put it. And I was like, this guy knows more about how to please a woman. And so you can talk to the people there. If it helps, and I did my own, like I'm very nerdy because again, even self-pleasure with allowing like other things. So you're opening yourself up to use things on your body. Um, there's a couple things I want to say about it. One, I think it should be something that you're drawn to. Like you open your
Mm.
drawer, don't you want to get excited, or do you want to open your drawer and get confused that it looks like the kitchen drawer? Like, no. I want you to be able to open that drawer, or cabinet, wherever you put your stuff, like open and be like, I'm so excited. Like, so I use crystal or glass toys, and they're coming from I use a product brand that like it's created clean and it's safe, and I've been using it for years, so I trust that one. But I didn't know about it till I did some research, and I found out like what things did feel good for my body and what didn't. Like and this goes for lube too. There's so many lubes out there, and everyone will tell you, well, this will feel great because it's warm, and this one's cold, and this one tastes good. And anyone can tell you anything, but you have to do your homework. And I would say, aside from you, if you go to the store, if you go online, check out the reviews. If there's certain words you don't understand, take a closer look at it. I would encourage clean lubrications, cleaner products. There are companies out there who don't use a lot of plastics because you are putting it in. It's not just a vulnerable place, but it's a very absorbing area. So it's going to pick up everything, which is why it's
Mhm.
important to use clean things. It's important to take showers and wipe everything else. Um, so doing a little homework, but do it in strides. You don't have to get the whole kit today. You can start because it can be very overstimulating and overwhelming I have to have it all because I have to figure it out. No, what you like right
Mhm.
now, you'll probably change your mind next year. And if you're starting with, toys, let's say you get something, and maybe, even starting with something super small, because getting to know your body and using things like if you're, and I'm talking more like, regular vaginal penetration, you can use smaller toys just to get comfortable with the sensation of what you're doing. And then you get to enjoy that when you're with someone else. So I would say you can make it fun without taking it all in and without playing the comparison game, and I do preface this a lot. Like if you see something and you're like, I don't know, don't buy it. Because if you buy it, why would you open the drawer and be like, oh, you I open my drawer and I'm like, so pretty, and I like lay it out and I clean it, and you create this whole ritual. So shopping can
Yeah.
be vulnerable, and I do think it is important. Like, if you don't have someone to go with, the people who work at these stores are professionals, so they'll be able to help you out.
Mm. Yes, I absolutely love that. Oh my gosh, I feel like I have so much more that we could talk about, but I do want to bring the episodes to a close. I think this is a phenomenal start to get our listeners on the right page. So, in relation to this podcast, I love to ask all of my guests a final question before we sign off, which is how would you define the word regulate? What does that mean to you?
Regulate. I feel like the word regulate to me means come back home.
Mhm.
It means, almost a way not to turn off, but to tune back in and come back to yourself. And when I hear regulate, I think of when people say, oh, I need to regulate my nervous system. Like, so you need to breathe? But for me personally, it's just remember, like, you are a human being, and it's, whether it's myself, because I know I'm good at it, because I get very excited about work. Um, it is so important to remember that it's the more you nourish and come back to yourself to regulate yourself, the more appreciation and confidence you have for the life that you are creating versus constantly expelling yourself in all these buckets or, well, I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, I'm a wife, I'm a lover, and I'm like, that's amazing. But what about outside the titles? How do you define who
Mm.
you are? And that comes from regulation. And this whole lovely topic we've had, like even a form of self-pleasure is a form of regulation because you're reconnecting with the senses in your body and creating that relationship and nourishing it. So coming back home is what I think of when you say regulate,
I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, go regulate yourself has a totally different meaning
right?
after today's episode. Amazing. Okay, I loved our conversation today. I know our listeners are also going to be feeling the exact same way as I do. How can they find you? If they're interested in working with you, following along your journey, just learning more and starting to step into the world of self-pleasure, where do they go?
You can go to theselflovescientist.com and you can learn a little bit more about me. You can connect with me there. I always offer free calls just to connect. And you can learn more about the different programs. And then you can tune into Love and Lattes, which is a great social audible platform where we're having all these conversations. And if you want to follow my own journey, I'm Victoria Icenhower on Instagram. Although I don't have a huge, like, I don't put a lot out there. That's part of my process for this year. And that's part of my regulation process. But if you want to see what's going on and how I'm romanticizing life, it's there.
Mm. I love it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I hope that we'll have you back on the podcast in the future because I feel like we need to dive a little bit deeper and
Yes.
ask some more questions.
Yes, thank you for having me, Brienne. This was so much fun. As you can see, I'm like, we can go here and then I'll pivot over here. It's such a great conversation. It's such an important one, and I'm really glad we got to do it on your podcast.
Me too. I appreciate you so much. And a big thank you out to all of our listeners who are with us today. We appreciate you being here. If you loved what you heard, we'd be so honored if you drop below and leave a review or send this episode to somebody who could hear it too. Remember to go regulate yourself, and I will catch you in the next episode. Take care. Hey, Rig Babe, have you heard the news? We have a brand new members only community called Rig Babes After Dark, and you're going to want to get your booty inside here. Whether you're new to your healing journey or not, you're tired of the typical gurus and picture perfect accounts on social media that look like they have it all figured out. You're ready for something deeper, something raw, something that makes your jaw drop open and go, yeah, I feel that way too. And in this space, we get it. We're tired of pretending that healing somehow makes us saints. We're looking for the babes who are working on themselves, who like to cuss, and ultimately are ready to have the tough, uncomfy convos that most shy away from. So this space is where Go Regulate Yourself goes off script. When you subscribe here, you're entering into a vaulted world of exclusive, member-only questions we didn't ask on the mic, unfiltered guest insights, VIP access to live streams, and behind-the-scenes moments you won't find anywhere else. This isn't the space for those who want to keep pretending they've got it all figured out. This is for the ones who admit that they don't. Now, the guest that you just heard on today's episode is being featured here for a behind-the-scenes peek at their personal life and questions we did not get to, and we would love to invite you to explore that in our Substack publication and member-only space. So to join Ray Babes After Dark, go to goregulateyourself.substack.com or visit the link below in the show notes. We have 1 week free trials available for you to jump into the space, check it out, and join us for some extra juicy behind the scenes moments. We cannot wait to connect with you and look forward to seeing you after dark. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Go Regulate Yourself podcast. If you felt called out in the best way, I would be so honored if you drop below and leave a review or share this with a friend who needs to hear it too. And remember, regulate yourself before you wreck yourself. I'll catch you in the next episode. Mwah.